be a brief one, don't worry folks, so it's up to a whole half an hour, and I'm going to try and play more recording, but this means me doing stuff like getting out the PowerPoint. I'm not pretty sure how to do it, but we're happy to go. So I thought we'd start with a song, actually. So I thought we'd go straight to this one, but I don't know how to play it, Martin, I can't remember. So can I click on this?
That was the one that was online.
It is, yes.
So you need to go out of the presentation. Ah.
Sorry, folks. And then go to somewhere that is already on. So it's because partly because I'm not a Mac user as well, so I don't know how to do it. I had all set up earlier, apologies. It was partly to get round sort of having to download the sound into the PowerPoint. I apologise. So, yeah. It was worth it.
Should we just sing it for you? I know how it goes.
And it's a childish voice.
Yeah.
I remember now, that's what I do.
That's the version I know.
The yellow rose of Texas, the man from Miami, he went to Davy Crockett's to have a cup of tea. The tea was so delicious, he had another cup, so poor old Davy Crockett had to do the washing up.
Thank you, right, thanks Martin for retrieving that. Now I see if I can get into the PowerPoint again.
Circle of Doom.
That's right, okay. So that's, as you see, Hamish Henderson and Kenny Goldstein, 1960 in Stricken in Aberdeenshire. And what I want to draw your attention to is the unknown person who contributed to that. And I just wanted to make the point about the invisibility of children in archives and archival catalogues. They may be, well, as we will see, child or all sorts of ways, and you have to be quite inventive how you retrieve them, as it were, from a catalogue. But as you know, children and young people have learned, performed, transmitted, preserved, created and prompted songs and musical games throughout history. And these songs and games, like other kinds of folklore, by and for the younger generation, are an important source for understanding the cultural worlds and childhood experiences. So what evidence do we have of children's worlds in the past? Historians of childhood lament that sources relating to children's lives are scarce, and that children's voices themselves are often absent. But we know, as folklorists, that naturalists, antiquarians, folklorist teachers, and many others have been documenting children's folklore from at least the 19th century. And there's in fact a wonderful 17th century source by the ornithologist Francis Willoughby, whose Book of Games not only describes adult games, but also children's games, and in fact they think that the writing of a child is preserved in that document as well. It's amazing. That's from 17th century. So there is stuff from children in the record. Obviously the archival collection of the Oak is one of the most well-known of these sources. But even then, the archival collection, I mean, we know the books, but the archival collection, we're only just finding out the riches that it contains, which is far more vast even than the books themselves, which are a bit of a distillation of their massive amount of collectania. So this is just a little bit about how we can locate those sources, find out more about them, and locating those often unnamed children and young people from whose lives they come from. So this is a sort of project, a pet project of mine really, ongoing, to just kind of discover and find out where those sources are, where, you know, who's got recordings and collections of children's stuff. Obviously there's ones that are in which children are the main focus of the collection, like the opus, but there's also children's recordings that are embedded amongst other things, like, you know, maybe a calendar custom, but it has children's elements in it or something like that. I suppose sort of slightly dreaming idealism, I hope that one day we could make those cross-searchable from a common interface. It would just be amazing, wouldn't it, to sort of press a button and be able to get not just the opus stuff or stuff that was collected at the time of the opus as well, or just after, but, you know, sort of see, you know, comparative research and understanding continuity and change in childhood. It would be amazing. So that we can find out also and inspire young people to preserve their culture now for future generations. It's ongoing, it's one of the most dynamic and vibrant forms of folklore. So Steve and I had sort of, you know, got our friends to join in this group of folk and traditional music collections, and this is based partly on asking some of them to tell us what was in their archives, and many of them for you know, completely legitimate reasons were unable to tell me, but I've still got the inquiry in there. Some people sent me absolutely fantastic set of information, and I just want to say that in fact a lot of what I'm going to say is actually taken from their listings and their overviews of what these archives have, and there'll be a few other collections thrown in as well. But it makes sense to start with the 4 millions, and here I'm indebted to Malcolm's work answering my query, and gave me a very comprehensive set of findings of what the catalogue held, both in the library and in the archives, and it's the archival stuff I'm going to focus on. And I apologise, I know this is the old interface, but that was probably when you did the work. And this just shows, I think, this idea that you've got to be very creative as to who you look for when you're trying to find the children's contributions. And so Malcolm worked out that you need to do boy, asterisk, girl, asterisk, school, pupil, child. I could probably add a few other ones in there, son, daughter, sometimes comes up. But there's also children who are guisers, so we need to say guisers, and they might be a brownie or something like that. So, you know, you've really got to use and experiment with search terms to find the way they've been catalogued, and they are invisible a bit in the record. And we can also say that, because it's quite a generic title, isn't it? It's, you know, it's about rather like sort of saying, as Carpenter does, you know, old woman with screechy voice. It's just awful and a bit, you know, really disrespectful. But if the children were named, we'd never find them, because we don't know the names of those children. They're not famous performers like Harry Cox or anybody like that. So if they're actually named, we can't find them either. So all these things make it quite difficult to unearth these sorts of materials. And obviously, childhood stuff can be remembered by adults. I'm going to focus particularly here because I'm very keen on it, as you'll have realised. Children's own voices, stuff where they've written it down themselves or been recorded in their own voices, performing and practising items. So this is just going to be a kind of show and tell, I think, because of the time. So these are just some of the things that those search terms would fetch up. So we've got this lovely sort of carol sung by children at the door, which Anne Gilchrist managed to notate there. If I can see it, it's a bit difficult, it's a bit faint actually, it's quite hard to read musically. Here we go. We have been a-rambling o'er the fields so green. We have been a-rambling o'er the fields so green. For it is a Christmas time, strangers travel far and near, and we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. A New Year, a New Year. And we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, or something like that. So but it's hard to read, and also you want to go into that other well-known version that was at the Albion Band. So we've also got this little thing that Sharp collected, a little singing game there, and this pancake song, again, Sharp, in Sharp's words there. So, you know, there's no mention of children here, but it's of school. So that's how we know it's from, we think, anyway, from the children. So I'm going to do a little bit of a, you know, sort of Britain and Ireland kind of approach here. So Scotland, we've had an excerpt already. Just to mention other collections that are important, we know that Margaret Bennett's worked very hard and did a TSF talk on William Montgomery, who recorded at a school in Dundee. He made some recordings long before the Opus actually did sound recordings. He made these recordings, and there's a CD with this, if you can still play it, which is largely of singing games, but that's wonderful. We know that Alan Lomax came over. He teamed up with James T.R. Ritchie, who was a school teacher in, well, is it Edinburgh or was it Leith? He always made a great thing about the fact that the dividing line between Edinburgh and Leith ran through the middle of his school, and then we did sort of chemistry in Leith, and then you had to go to English in Edinburgh. So this is something that Ewan Vicker has helped bring together, which is some of the Lomax recordings. Ritchie himself also documented with, he asked the children to contribute items in written form, very much as the Opus did as well. Oh, I'm going to omit Wales. I'm really sorry. It's partly because I've not had any responses from Wales, so, but they also have lots. And I'm going to jump straight to the National Folklore Collection, which has been mentioned several times today at UCD. Incredible treasures here, just the photos. Everybody talked about photos, but photos of singing, photos of musical activities. These aren't necessarily musical, but I just think they're amazingly beautiful photos. The wishbone, God, that brought back loads of memories for me, and you know, breaking it and so on. The St John's night bonfire, reading the tyres to the bonfire. And then I just love the expression on this little chap's face as this older girl prepares to absolutely smashes. Look at them. Oh, why did you get on with it then? So, but they have, and we've had reference to this the school's collection already, just the most incredible items. And, help me with the name, Catherine, is it Alba? Who is the library? Alba, yeah. Sorry, I'll just go back to that slide, so we're still talking about here. They, in the school's collection, that's largely written. It's all online, and it's just incredible, so do have a look at it, as was illustrated earlier. Mainly the children, and it's still sort of about children in a way, because they were the collectors. It's less about their own lore, except that there was a question about the games I play and about homemade toys. And Alba's written some amazing blogs about this, and you can look through some of those. So there is some children's folklore documented by children in there as well. So well worth looking at, and just a huge collection of children's play, stories and so on. We're now at the Irish Traditional Music Archive, where, among other things, this is a whistle-stop tour, they hold Hugh Shields' collection. I know that many of you know him as a sort of, you know, ballad scholar, but actually, with his wife, collected a lot of children's songs and rhymes. I think that children's rhymes are part of the music. It's a very rhythmic, and you have to be rhythmic. If you do a skipping song and you don't do that rhyme rhythmically, you can't really skip to it. So, same with ball bouncing. So I see that as a form of musical performance by children. And this collection, which is a sort of microsite in its own right, they curated a lot of Hugh Shields' recordings in there, and it's well worth a visit, it's wonderful. I myself, as I know you all know, work very part-time on the Child Citizen Play project, and that has the primary goal of working on the Iona OP archive. But we're just working with the manuscript material. These are the children's contributions to the OPs in the sort of 1950s and 60s, when they started to gather written contributions through teachers via questionnaires, which were very open-ended, and they actually call them suggestionnaires, which I think is a term that should be in every qualitative handbook, qualitative research handbook. Suggestionnaires, open-ended. They didn't know what there was to collect. The children were telling them and came up with all sorts of stuff they'd never even thought of. Obviously, it would be wonderful if we could get the metadata from the British Library to get the Opus sound recordings into here. We have spoken about it and got so far, but of course it's not really in the frame at the moment, and we'd still need to link to their actual recordings when they come back online. And the Folklore Society also holds some of the Opus material, which has yet more children's materials in it, children's contributions. But do visit, it's partially catalogued, there's so much more. But I just wanted to use this to draw attention to some of the issues that are around using this material. Now, the Opus material, every single child pretty much has written their name, whole name, their school, their age on the contributions. So we have a huge problem in terms of personal data. Even though those people are not children anymore, they are sort of between 65 and 85 years old, still the personal data. I suppose we could wait a bit longer and then just sort of, that problem sort of I know this has been pushing a bit crudely, but sort of disappears. But also we're missing an amazing opportunity to get in touch with them, find out a bit more about their contribution. What childhood did that come from? The Opus didn't really record much about, say, the demographics of that school, for example. At the same time, it's also their intellectual property, and it will remain so for 70 years after their death, strictly speaking. And given that, they're sort of, perhaps the older generation are beginning to go now, well, that's the turn of the next century, guys, before that really is out of copyright, and that's a long time. And we would love to be able to contact them all and find out a bit more, as I say, about them, and see if they would consider making it copyright free. Although some of them who, words that were used and are offensive, and how would you feel about having your name associated with that? How would you feel about that still being up online? And the trouble is that there's between 15 and 20,000 contributors there to find. And it's not easy. It's not who do you think you are, where all the documentation is happening. It's going forward, so you have to, we don't have the married names of many of the women who will have changed their names on marriage and so on. And if you've got a common surname, it's a bit of a needle in a haystack. But we would still like to do it. We're thinking about doing an appeal. We've heard about Kelsey already. I did have some recordings, but I think you've had a lot of lovely Kelsey recordings. So he was, as James has already highlighted, a school teacher. I think he began teaching sort of in the late 60s, and some of his earliest recordings might come from sort of the 70s. He was very much inspired by the Opus, as were many teachers. As some of you know, the Opus books were actually used in teacher education. And so there was a lot of collecting just following on that time. And his collection was left to the Archives of Cultural Tradition, and Jason and Janet edited it for publication finally. I thoroughly recommend that. What's been amazing has been James's interest, which was not part of the original remit, was it at all? When you first came to us, it was all about the OP materials. And I think, if I'm right in saying, James has sort of sat in special collections with 7 tape record, or digitising, able to, what would you call them? Digitisation machines. I can't even think what
there was 7 or 8 tape decks coming into an interface. I was digitising 7 tapes in order.
So thanks to James, all of the Kelsey recordings are now digitised, and he's arranging them based on some of those transcriptions and everything, which is an incredible godsend, and it's an amazing reciprocal gesture, and above and beyond the Call of Duty, for which we're supremely grateful. So they will be arranged.
Here's a comment about.
So that's all the school language stuff. I just wanted to highlight one other thing from the Archives of Cultural Tradition, which is Mavis Curtis's collection, Children's Folklore. Some of you will have known Mavis. It was through Mavis that I got into the children's folklore and the study of it. And what's incredible about her collection is we hardly have any multicultural collections of children's play, but hers is. And I was going to find, I don't know whether I should probably finish with this, but I just wanted to play you one of the recordings of school children in Keighley, which is in sort of Punjabi, but it's lovely, and there's a note on it. It was actually part of the British Library's Playtime site, which has all gone down, of course. But all these are on YouTube, so you can still fetch them up. So if you can bear with me, I'll see if I can do the magic again. Actually, I should have stayed in there and see if I can get it. Is that the link? Does it work like this? Let me see. Oh, I don't know how to get it. I'm really sorry. This is all meant to be beautifully set up. Perhaps I'll leave you to find it. But it's British Library Playtimes and then Akabaka. But the children actually identify that is their equivalent to Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo. They do it a slightly different way. It's an elimination rhyme. So I don't know if I'll ever map all this stuff, but I'd really love to be able to do that. Not just map where it's all deposited, but actually map, oh, it's not in the presentation, where does it where the stuff relates to the dates and so on, because that's mapping, and I think also place is a really important way into a lot of these things now. Some people are interested in it as a singing game or whatever, but a lot of people are interested because it's local history to them, and these schools, it's their school's history. So I think, you know, if we can map where some of these things were known and learned and practiced, that's and going to encourage a wider community and public engagement. So I was going to finish by saying that we need to map them. It would be interesting to know what the gaps were as well. I think there's going to be a lot of material immediately after the OPIS, but later on, you know, sort of where are those collections, the earlier period, and can we link them up from a common interface? Can we do that? And also, which groups of children are not represented in there? As I said, there's very little multicultural recordings there, and that will be interesting to see if we can try and fill the gap. So the idea there is really to improve access for everybody to these archives, to support not only scholarship but education and engagement, and allow teachers, communities and children themselves, I think they're a really important audience for what we do, to encounter and contribute to this tradition. In time, as I said earlier, I think the idea is that they should have a sense that their own culture is also important and has been valued enough to be sufficiently to be preserved, and even with all the problems of maybe mediation and stuff that they would not necessarily want to share with an adult, that they're given that possibility of you know, the value, the sense of value in their own culture. So if anyone has any suggestions for other things, for other collections that they know of that I should include in this, please get in touch. But that's sort of an ongoing thing with me. So that's it.
Yes, we have a question. You don't disappear.
Yes, please.
You use the term children, but if I think back 70 years when I was in the children's playground, it was always the girls that were musical, singing, skipping, dancing. The boys might occasionally exchange a dirty poem or something, but in my experience it was almost always the girls who were the carriers of this tradition. I just wonder if that was your experience as well.
But that would be one of the very things we could map if we had it throughout, sort of, let's say, the whole of the 20th century and into the 21st. That would be so interesting to look at. I know what you mean, and I've definitely seen that, and it's talked about in the OPIS work. And you do see it. What I think depends what you mean by carriers of the tradition, because I've also worked in the playground, and some of our recordings that we made in sort of about 2010 in a school in Sheffield are also in that British Library playlist, form part of that website. What's really interesting is there's some boys who want to be part of that. Iona also talks about how the young boys want to be part of it. There's one boy who I think really identifies with the girls and would like to join in, and you can see him in it's video. You can see he's trying to get in there, and he's trying to get into the ring and take part, and he's kind of doing all the clapping, not in an interfering way, but he's trying to be part of it. And then you get sort of boys looking, maybe my interpretation, a bit enviously sort of from the edge, possibly the cohort you were with. Yeah, this is good, I wish I could do that. So,
but never admitted, of course.
No, I mean, it's just an interesting thing. And I think now, possibly with, you know, sort of YouTube, and because I saw this, you know, since 2005, 7, what was YouTube? Somewhere around there, wasn't it? It had a massive impact, and it's become much more possible for boys to do movement stuff. But yes, you're right, it was.
Now TikTok.
And oh god, TikTok's what I'm going to forget.
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
Could I just say something about that?
Looking up, sorry.
When I was researching my
Oh, your book, yes, of course.
book, I specifically asked about boys and girls playing, and usually asked the girls, and twice, 2 things were said. One was, oh, it's only the girls that do this, except Leo, but he's Italian. The other one was, do boys do it? Well, no, none of the boys do it well, except for Fred, but he wants to be an actor.
Well, I did, I'm so sorry, and I did a questionnaire about it, and they say, I like to clap with this person because they are gentle. And it was about the touch and the actual taking on of the performance, you know, that you didn't come about it in a kind of roughshod way. And, you know, that was also, I think, part of the aesthetic. So, yeah, interesting question, thank you. So sorry, let's
Yes,
see.
sorry, just thinking about across the, obviously we're looking at songs from 50, 60 years ago, recordings and things, and we had a limited number of sources. But the thing about, what was the American song? The Yellow Melody to Texas. Yes, and we had the, but looking at schools now, how much outreach is there to schools? Because our local school in the summer wouldn't touch folk songs, or they have got no schools, no proper music specialists. So they sang Uptown Girl previous year. They'd done YMCA to a very loud soundtrack. When I intended, I'm not obviously not working there, but I'd hoped to go in and teach them one song that always seems to go out, Pleasant and Delightful. Kids love it. I've been into a class and they're sitting on the floor waiting for me to come in next week singing it. But aside from what the children are doing, having a 94-year-old in our local folk club and making sure we sing songs that she learnt in school, which we had a fairly good repertoire of. Okay, if you give her The Farmer's Boy and Barbara Allen and things, she will recognise them, and it kept her going. It's things like that, they're a common base of national songs. There's so much in the current school repertoire which is all very socially aware, let's say be inclusive songs without tunes. So, you know, I'm just thinking how much we could take out into schools.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting, so you're talking a little bit really about music education here, which is a slightly different kettle of fish, isn't it? And there is a whole debate about how much we should use and how much Sharp used and how, you know, whether we should be using this, because some of us remember fondly the first time we encountered a lot of this stuff that we now work so much with was in a school classroom. But also there are those who say, well, it's so heavily mediated, it had accompaniments and this sort of thing. So I think this is, I know this is a contested topic, which I think possibly we could get into, but maybe not in this session. But I will say, you know, a lot of people, of course, think they're children's play, and we always hear this, don't we, Steve? Anyone who's worked in children's acting will know this, that we always say, oh yes, the Opus heard that they were 50 years too late. The Opus heard that. You know, we think of that as the golden age, you know, and, you know, we found that, I think that sort of, they're just so many media influences, but they are using those so creatively in the playground. So, you know, it goes on, these processes. Oh gosh, we've got loads of hands now.
Who was first? You pick.
Was first, and then I think it came this way. So.
Sorry, I was just wondering, Julie, have you gone to the schools looking for information on who? I mean, would it be a nice thing to go back to the schools for the Opie's recording and say to them, can you help us solve this problem? Here's the recordings that were done in Europe. Can anybody, any of these children go home and ask their parents or ask the local shop and say, who I recognize? Surely that would be a way into identifying people.
Yeah, we have in fact, yeah, we've done that. Not to the extent there are about, I think it's 250 schools, major sort of contributors to the collection, and we've done it Ecclesfield Grammar School. Okay, so this is the point that I thought you were going to make was, well, you sort of did make that child, what was a child anyway? You know, we've got some contributing from Aberdeen who are sort of 14 or 15, and they're just saying, well, you know, I'm about to leave school, so I don't play those things anymore. But I remember playing them, you know, they're already talking like adults sort of thing. Yeah, we went to Ecclesfield Grammar School, we went back to Ecclesfield School, it's still the same. Some of the Opie schools don't exist, but some do. We went to one in London. What we found is that even with places, like there's a load of real sort of local history enthusiasm in around Sheffield's area. Local history is a big thing, many local history groups. But we still find it really hard to trace the descendants of those contributors. But they did have school magazines. I mean, it's a huge, huge project, and we feel that what would be really good would be to collaborate with local history groups and say, here's the stuff, because until we catalog it, it doesn't appear in the Opie collection. you take it, you find these people, it will be wonderful, and let's work collaboratively on this, because we can never have that level of local knowledge. But yes, it would be amazing to do, and I think would also throw up a lot. You know, then you've got the people who weren't at that particular school but lived at that particular time, and they want to get into it as well. So next thing you know, you're creating a secondary archive in a way based on that, I don't know.
Chris, was it? Someone.
Chris, and then, Chris Simple, let's do it that way. Sorry, I don't know what the
Well, I
order
attended two schools, so I lived in the same town all the time. My primary school was mixed. The girls did skipping games, the boys didn't. And they were the girls were the ones who had the songs. And then I went to a school run by the Christian Brothers. Well, that was a different experience altogether. Boys only, and it was what it was. But boys didn't skip in the society I was living in at the time. We did a skipping rope, and you wouldn't be seen dead skipping with a group of girls, and they didn't want to have you anyway.
Yes, I think that, you know,
It was
there
the
is
50s,
that.
so it was different.
I was going to say, and I think that is what an archive where it shows that across time we could actually begin to see how societal and cultural changes are, you know, bigger ones are affecting what's going on and that sort of
in Sussex we have long skipping at Easter, and that's adults and it's males and females.
Yes, that's long skipping, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I heard a radio programme quite a number of years ago where somebody was discussing this, and one of the things that they said was that preschool children's games tended to be considerably more complex melodically and rhythmically. And then they went to school, and it was almost as if they'd started doing a singing class and realised, oh no, that's difficult, and dumbed it down. I just wondered how much, because all the ones your collections are talking about are school, which is very much a sort of an imposed community, and I wonder what research has been done on the preschool years.
Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head, actual preschool recordings. Gosh, something that went across my mind as you said that. You know, there's been that sort of, in the clapping play, I've certainly seen the responses to popular music and how it became more, you know, syncopated, so you now get that, you know, more complex in the clapping games. Oh, I was just going to recommend, if you haven't read, and it's a fantastic study, it's a book by Catherine Marsh, who's an Australian music educator, and it's called The Musical Playground. And one thing she talks about is the, the music educator guy from Eastern Europe, I want to say. Kodai, thank you so much. Yes, sorry, remembering not what it was. The Kodai method, and yes, how it, in some ways, you know, sort of assumed, you know, it's based on a kind of evolutionary perspective, although the Kodai method is still quite strong in some parts. We have a colleague in America who still uses it. But what she does, to her credit, is Kathy shows how complex what's actually just happening amongst the kids in the playground is compared to what they're being taught in music in school. And that's, quite satisfying to read about. And it's an international study, so she came and worked with Mavis Curtis. She went to Korea, I think. She went to the States. She's in Australia. And in Australia, she worked in a very multicultural playground in Sydney. And she was showing how the rhymes and so on, even when they're in another language with the children who sort of come in quite recently, moved into the community, because there's such a high acceptance of nonsensical words, as it were, to those who don't speak the language. You know, the children just picked them up because they were fascinated by the sounds. It's a fascinating study, I'd recommend. I'm sure the book.
But there you are, you win the prize for the most questions, I think.
Thank you so much. Well, it's a pleasure.
The final session is an informal and probably brief one, which is just works in progress. Only one person has volunteered to present on their work in progress. I'll just say, actually, most people here attend the TSF Zoom meeting, so you may well already be aware of my Kent Trad website, very much inspired by Gloss Trad. I think when I presented to TSF, I'd pretty much finished all the kind of up to 1950s pencil and paper sort of transcriptions and writing about the singers, and so there's now the beginnings of articles on singers that Kennedy recorded, so Phoebe Smith, for instance, and and even in a few cases some transcriptions, but keep your eyes on the site, kenttrad.org, and there's more stuff coming in the coming weeks and months and years, if we're spared. I should also say that, in case you're not aware, In the Round, the podcast series, is back this week, and David, who was sitting there until a moment ago, was this week's historical guest, talking about Patrick Spence, and very interesting it was, and I dare say Steve will be on it at least once in the coming, I'm going to call it a series, just to annoy Matt, as he calls it, a season. But yeah, there's always good stuff there. Stepping Out is coming soon. If you haven't already, see Megan and subscribe, because that's bound to be interesting. I mean, I say that with no real knowledge, but I'm sure it's going to. I have every faith in you. Pizza, oh yes, Peter. Yes, Peter's he's got a project about an area you might not have been expecting.
While he's setting that up, there's recently been the Song Detectorists on Radio 3, which has been Nancy Kerr going into record offices and looking at things like tune collection.
The essay series,
series,
wasn't it?
yeah.
The 5 programmes back in about June and July, so they're all on.
I think there's
The next series coming.
another series.
Yeah. Another one.
Series coming.
Is it next week?
Yeah, very soon.
Oh, right,
This week,
excellent.
next week,
Right.
yeah. It's next week.
Okay, well, this is, I brought this because I've got a particular photograph I want you to see later in the presentation. Does it actually started? Yeah. So I've been doing some work, people might know me more for my work on folk plays, because I've segued into work on the folk traditions on the island of Tristan da Cunha, which is British overseas territory in the South Atlantic. I've got a blank slide here somewhere. There we go. That's a picture of the island, which is a volcano. Those of you of a certain vintage may remember it. There was an eruption in 1961 and the whole population was evacuated to the UK, and after 2 years they'd had enough, they went back. It is the remotest community in the world. It's 1,500 miles from anywhere. I've been there twice, and you can't fly. And yeah, so it's interesting. It's so remote, everybody's very interested. So there's lots of information been recorded, especially published. In fact, it has been said, someone only has to fart on Tristan. There's a book being published, an article. I'm trying to keep, I've just thrown these together over lunchtime. There's quite a bit of audio material available and some of it published. Peter Kennedy and Maud Carpelese went down to Calshot near Southampton, where they were evacuated, and did some recordings. They were put in the British Library archive, which is still not there, I don't think. And also Peter Kennedy, who was a local guy, I understand, published a DVD, a CD rather, with them too. There was also a Norwegian gentleman, Peter Munch, who did a lot of recordings, and a fellow Scandinavian, Roland Smason, did lots of recordings. And these I seem to have quite a copy of. This is actually one of 2 storage crates. This is not the one I wanted to show you, which is actually brim full of cassette recordings. This is all audio material, but it was 50% oral history, but 50% was actually folk material. So it is music, song, and a certain amount of cultural tradition as well. And then also a similar, this crate full of film. Some interesting stuff. The first photograph I showed you was a screen grab from one film, which is, I've got the original 60mm reels in my garage. Not quite sure what to do with it. It's got some lovely pictures of dancing and musicians are playing. The only problem is it's silent footage, which is not of use. So the archive material, generally speaking, is available. I've got the stuff in the crates in my own personal possession at the minute. Belongs to the Tristan da Cunha Association, so when I pop my clubs it should go back to somebody with them. But it's trying to transcribe material. A lot of it is listed in an inventory. I must admit that spending 2 weeks going to Tristan on a fishing boat helped me in trying to transcribe some of the materials. You have to do something to pass the time. But the main reason I'm talking today is not so much about what I've been doing, it's about the risks we're talking about with archives, because this is a picture that was taken just a few months before I went last time. And this was, we had in July 2019 and again in November 2019, they had a couple of very severe storms, hurricane force in places, and this is what happened to the museum and archive there at that time. Now,
Disaster planning.
Right, exactly so. I never got to actually see the archives there because they were still trying to put it all back together. I was told that everything had been waterlogged and thrown out. I now know that was not true. The stuff in the cases, in the museum cases, was thrown out. It was paper-based, mostly copies. Fortunately, the archives were in sort of cabinets which seemed to have been, to a degree, protected from the storm, and the water damage and all that sort of thing. The roofs were ripped off, the building altogether. But I did actually do work on their book collection. They had 2 glass-fronted book cabinets full of books. The glass front had helped, but I reckon about 2/3 were water damaged to some degree, and 25% were actually totally unusable. And interestingly, if you've got shiny paper like this one, I think, it's probably glazed with kaolin clay. If it gets wet, you end up with a solid block you can do nothing with. I've seen that at the British Library as well. So, fortunately, before this happened, they had started taking part in one of these British Library Endangered Archives initiatives. So they started digitising material. And that material, that is carrying on right now, as I speak now, I think, although I might have broken up the tea. And this is a picture, to finish off with a picture of my colleague Nick Schoenfeld, who's a Dutch journalist actually, who's spending quite a few months on there. They put all the salvaged archives into these proper archive boxes. He's been on a course to learn about archiving. They're very keen. He's got a partner who's a professional photographer. They're doing some serious digitisation and photographing, and also working with the local community to gather photographs and personal artefacts to digitise. And they're hoping that's going to include some tape recordings and videos, though they've not found any yet. I think people are a bit shy. I was hoping to contact some of the musicians whilst I was there, and I was there for 2 months. They like to hide. It turns out I was the traditional musician. I was playing for the dancers and things like that rather than them instead. But I think that previous picture, where it's gone to, I lost it. Lost it now, sorry. Anyway, the picture of the damage is I think is a salutary tale for us all. And as you say, you said disaster planning, so yeah, quite. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Right, just mentioning one more thing in this short report, and then it's time to wind up. One of the bright ideas that we've had in the TSF, we're always coming up with bright ideas, is that we really should be documenting ourselves and our predecessors, who are still around, who are even older than us. In other words, we need an oral history project to record each other. Everybody in this room has stuff to tell us, not only about yourselves, that's easy enough to get people talking about themselves, but we are interested in, the folk revival, the interest in our kind of stuff since the Second World War, or even before it, if anybody's older. In other words, we really do need to document what we've done, what we are doing, why we didn't do what we said we would do, and so on. Because if we don't do it, the next generation's going to get it wrong. We know this. So we have the beginnings of a project, an oral history project. We started making a list of people that we think should be recorded first. Some of you are on it. And we would like volunteers to join in that, but we would also like people to look in their cupboards and their drawers to find out the interviews that they did years ago of so-and-so who's now no longer with us, or whatever. In other words, it's got to be a cooperative project. The plan is that the TSF will gather the material and document it as best we can, i.e. at least catalogue what's there and maybe get some people transcribing and so on, or machinery to do it. And Vaughan Williams, we hope, will take the material from us as the permanent archive that TSF would keep the backup. In other words, lodge it in different places, as we said. So if anybody wants to join in that project, please contact Richard up front here, who's our current secretary. We do have one of the things that stopped us starting straight away is that, of course, if it's going to be in a proper archive, we need to get our permissions. I mean, I've got recordings of people. I have no permissions whatsoever. I have nobody didn't ask anybody to sign anything. If it's going to go into a proper archive, then we do need that kind of stuff. So if you have got recordings and the person you recorded is still alive, get them to write something, even if it's only saying that it can be lodged. It can be lodged in a public archive, and it can be accessible to accessible and usable by people. In other words, not closed and so on.
The Oral History Society has.
Yes, we have some recommended documents and so on. We're working on that. But the first thing is to get the word out that we are interested, and especially, as I say, things that you might have forgotten you've got. Please do tell us about them. It's not just England, although TSF is basically based in England, but we would obviously like to do all of the UK and Ireland as well. It won't take anything really. And at the same time, the Folklore Society, who are 150 years old next, 2028, they're 150 years old. So Julia and some others in the Folklore Society are thinking on the same lines, that we should be documenting our recent history. So hopefully we'll be working with the Folklore Society. So that's the short report. So it only remains to say thank you for coming. Thank you to our speakers. I think it's been really interesting, but of course I would, because I'm an indexer and a librarian, but I hope you've all enjoyed it as well. I think you have. Yes?
Oh, sorry. Can I just very quickly point people to the Sarah Morgan Foundation, who we allocate grants of up to £500 for any project that's got to do with particularly English folk song that has an educational aspect to it.
Right.
There's a very simple criteria on the website, and it's very simple to apply for. If it fits the criteria, we can give you £500.
Can you say the name again?
The Sarah Morgan Foundation. There are
the Sarah
leaflets.
Morgan. Right,
there are leaflets on the table.
But yeah, thank you. Yeah, we need more like that. If anybody else got thank you. As I say, thank you to our speakers. Don't forget that Veteran is at the back there if you want to spend some money before you go, or at least just to say hello. Thank you to the people who did our teas and coffees and biscuits. And unless anybody else has got any more questions,
just in case you're coming tonight,
coming tonight, yes.
If you pick up a little map leaflet there, it'll tell you where to find it and where you could park if you want to drive there. 7:30, we'll be kicked out at 10, sing a few songs. Nice. You'll come along, that'll be good.
Go and enjoy yourselves.
Go and enjoy yourselves, yes.
I did say to start on gloomy and end up happy.
No gloomy song.
Yeah. Cheerio, everybody. Thank you.